What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and it is time to continue on my series of reviews of the Alien and Predator franchise. If you are just now hopping on, I have been slowly making my way through the Alien and Predator films. When it comes down to the Predator franchise, though, as I've mentioned in previous installments, I have already covered a lot of different installments in this franchise. I just kind of left a couple of holes, like Predator 2, which I covered last week, and this one, Predators. But we've already covered all of the canon Alien films, including the latest installment, Alien Romulus, which I've seen twice and had a lot of fun with, and we're doing this now so that we can go back and cover Alien vs. Predator and Alien vs. Predator Requiem. So without further ado, let's get into the last Predator film I need to cover, because I've covered everything that's come out after this, and that film is simply titled Predators. Let's take a trip back to 2010 for a film directed by Nimród Antal, written by Alex Litvak and Michael Finch, and starring a slew of fantastic actors like Adrien Brody, Laurence Fishburne, Alice Braga, Topher Grace, Walton Goggins, and many more. Alright, I was so excited to get to this movie when it comes down to covering all of these movies. Predators is a film that I have a very fond place in my heart for. It's a film that knows what it is, takes it back to basics when it comes down to the Predator franchise. It is the most like the original in my personal opinion. It's a lot of fun to watch, but also, while I do recognize it's not a film that has a grand sense of narrative depth and great character development across the board, it's not trying to be. It's a film that asks you to sit down, eat some popcorn, watch some predators get killed, watch some predators kill some humans, and it has a fun premise. And on top of having a fun premise, it also has great actors in here that I do think elevate the material and allow it to just be an entertaining watch. While I was watching this movie this last time, it was my wife's first time, and she had a lot of fun with it too. And it was just one of those films that we just kind of breezed through, never really felt like we were bored, never really felt like there was any dead air. And yeah, it was just like a perfect, just random, chill day at home watch when it comes down to being an action film. And then you add in the fact that it's part of the Predator franchise, and that only makes it better for me. So without further ado, let's get into what this movie is all about. The movie opens up, and we're instantly introduced to Adrien Brody's character, the character of Royce. And we're going to get into all the individual characters here and their roles and where they come from and all that in just a second. But the movie opens up and he is plummeting down to the planet. He's like, what is going on? He realizes he has a parachute on, so he ends up, igniting that, making sure that the parachute deploys. He ends up landing in the jungle, a rainforest of some sort, and he ends up coming across various other individuals that are also coming down from the sky who have their own parachute. Some people unfortunately don't make it though, and immediately they're wondering what is going on. Why are we all in the middle of the rainforest or this jungle together? Where are we? How did we get here? I was somewhere else and I'm suddenly waking up in the middle of the sky. I don't remember anything. And then they slowly start to uncover things about one another and end up coming to the discovery of the fact that they are not on Earth. They're actually on some other planet, and end up learning that they have been chosen by the Predators to be prey. They are bringing these guys here like a safari, so to speak, dropping them on this planet and hunting them over the course of the film. And so I immediately love the premise of this film, right? When it comes down to a lot of the other Predator films, in the first one, it's classic. You have this commando group of individuals that are also in the rainforest, the jungle, and they just so happen to run into this one predator, and it's kind of a showdown between macho men and this really strong alien. In the sequel, it's like, hey, let's just put the Predator in the middle of Los Angeles, which was, a strange choice. But when it comes down to Predator, I feel like the best installments in the franchise, in my opinion, are when they kind of put the Predator in a situation that isn't in a city, and I think that Predators is one of those installments. And I think it's part of why I also love the prequel, Prey. I like the idea of a Predator coming who has all this technology and is able to cloak themselves and has to deal with individuals who are tactical and know what they're doing in nature. I don't know, I just kind of feels like that's the way Predator should be. And so in the case of this movie, I just love the premise of these Predators grabbing these individuals, dropping them onto this planet. And it's not just them, there are other alien species they come across throughout the course of the film that have also been dropped there to be hunted by the Predator. These just so happen to be the human characters that we're following, and they, over the course of the film, learn that they're not the only creatures or strong beings at all that are being dropped on this planet to be hunted. Which, again, just a cool premise. I love the Predators lore. I love the idea that they want a challenge and they just want to drop somebody there so they can try to see who's the strongest and try to fight them, or try to trick them, try to trap them. There's so many cool different ways that they try to eliminate their enemies instead of just kind of straightforward killing them. I just think the Predators are so cool in that way, and I think that this film really highlights what makes them a unique movie monster over any other film in the franchise. And we learn pretty quickly into the film that the reason that these specific individuals have been chosen is because they all are kind of elite in their own category, so to speak. So let's get into the individual characters and talk about what makes them elite, so to speak. I've already mentioned Adrien Brody. He plays the character of Royce. He's our main character in the film, a guy who wants to do things on his own, doesn't really care about the rest of the group, and most notably is an ex-military black ops mercenary who, again, just likes to do things on his own. Outside of him, you also have Alice Braga in here as the character of Isabel, who works for the military and has her own skill set when it comes down to weaponry and tactics. Then you have Walton Goggins in here, who's kind of a weird kind of standout in the mix. He plays the character of Stans, and he's actually on the FBI's most wanted list and was actually going to be executed in just a couple of days. And so he's there because he is a serial killer, he's a murderer, he's a rapist. You know, obviously he's a bad guy, but he's not necessarily the strongest in the bunch when you look at overall strength. But because he does kill a lot of people and has done a lot of bad things, the Predators chose to include him as one of the people that they brought to the planet. You also have Oleg Taktarov as Nikolai, which is a Russian soldier who's also been chosen, another soldier in the mix. You have Danny Trejo, who plays the character of Cuchillo, who is part of the Mexican cartel and has been chosen, of course, because of his violent past. Louis Ozawa is the character of Hanzo, who is a Yakuza member who's also been chosen because of his violent past. Mahershala Ali, who plays the character of Mombasa, who's part of a gang from Africa. And then the one that stands out the most in the mix is Topher Grace as the character of Edwin, who's just a doctor, he says to everybody. There's nothing about him that makes him strong or dangerous. He has no weapons when he lands here. He's just a random guy and seems like the weakling of the bunch who stands out. They don't necessarily know why he's part of the group, and they kind of have to protect him for majority of the film. And then the last actor that's notable to mention here, and we're going to get into him in a little bit, is Laurence Fishburne as the character of Ronald Nolan, an individual who had been dropped off similar to the rest of these characters years prior and was a sole survivor in the mix on this planet and had been hiding for the Predators for years. So those are who all our characters are. So immediately a bunch of characters who have skill sets of some sort or are murderers or, you know, badasses in their own way, which have essentially brought, you know, the target on them when it comes to the Predators. They want the people who have the most body count, who have killed a lot of people, who are ruthless, to come to this planet so that they can find a way to kill them or have some sort of challenge. And over the course of the film, there's various ways that they try to kill these humans. They try to send their dogs on them at a certain point, kind of like these predator dogs, which are kind of cool. I don't really know the name of them right off the top of my head. I'll put it on the screen, but they look really cool. I thought that was a cool element to add here. Something that's also really cool is that there are a couple of Predators that we get to see over the course of the film that are played by actors like Carey Jones, Brian Steele, and Derek Mears. And I think those guys do an incredible job when it comes down to just playing these characters. Add in to the fact that they have a huge stature. They're these big hulking dudes. You add in the practical effects and costumes that allow them to look like these monsters and look ginormous. And yeah, you know, these characters just look awesome in the film. They're imposing, and I really thoroughly enjoyed a lot of the body acting that's needed to play these characters. And of course, a lot of that is, you know, helped by some of the CGI that's kind of added to the face and other special effects, but also a lot of the practical effects that are added to the face, like the mouth that moves, the eyes that open. Obviously, there's a lot of people that go into making that all work, but the guys inside the suits and their stature and the way they move their body just adds to these characters being so imposing. And so, yeah, this is a pretty straightforward narrative. As I mentioned, there isn't an abundance about it that's really deep and adds to a bunch of character layers. It's not a movie by the time you get to the end of the film where you feel like you fully went on a journey with all these characters. And I think a criticism I could give this film right out of the gate is it maybe has one too many characters. I like all of these characters in their own way. I think they all have a moment of humor that you can enjoy, a moment that's charming in some way or another. It kind of is fun to watch all these hardened characters that kind of want to be on their own initially and are kind of, you know, second guessing one another, wondering if they're the ones that brought them there. You have all these characters who, you know, have this history of violence and ultimately, you know, they don't necessarily trust one another, eventually slowly starting to get to trust one another, maybe having small humorous moments or having a cool badass moment at some point. But ultimately, I don't think a lot of them really have tons of moments to shine. And it does feel like something where the movie could have probably benefited from one or two of these characters not being involved in the mix. Some of them, though, like with all of these films, are kind of meant to be fodder for a specific moment, like the character of Mahershala Ali. There's a moment in the film later on where they end up actually discovering the predator camp, and amidst this predator camp, they actually discover one predator is actually strung up. We end up learning that he's a smaller one, and the smaller ones get hunted by the bigger ones on this planet, and so that's where we end up getting introduced to the main predator threats in this film that are substantially larger than the one that's strung up. And amidst this scene, the predators actually set a trap, and Mahershala Ali's character is one of those characters that unfortunately just gets killed. Danny Trejo's character is another one that the same thing kind of happens to. He ends up getting killed fairly early into the film and essentially is just kind of used as a dead body, as a trap to try to lure in his friends by mimicking the voice of Danny Trejo. And those two aren't the only ones to die, but they're the ones that feel like they die the earliest with the least amount of character depth or any sort of like layers to their characters. There isn't an abundance that really happens with them. But outside of them, you also have characters like Walton Goggins' character, who has some moments to shine, but he really isn't given an abundance to do. I would say the most key moment in this film, outside of his death scene where he does try to fight a predator, is a scene where he decides to go off on a tangent about the fact that he can't wait to get back home so he can rape women. Or I think as he puts it, something bitches, rape bitches, bad bitches, something like that. Yeah, that's literally in the film. And by the way, I watched this on Disney Plus. But when it comes down to the main characters, the ones that are really the heart of the film for sure are Adrien Brody's character Royce, as well as the character of Isabel, played by Alice Braga. The two of them have the deepest connection out of all the characters. The two of them butt the heads the most and have the most interesting character dynamics. There's times where they don't like each other. There's times where they don't trust each other. There's times where they do trust each other. There's times where they don't want to lean on one another. There's times when they do lean on one another. And I feel like their up and down relationship throughout the course of the film is easily the most interesting character dynamic to follow over the course of the film. Now, a character that is interesting in the mix, though, is the character of Topher Grace. I mentioned before his character Edwin is just kind of the outlier in the mix. It doesn't seem like there really is much about him that would kind of have him be in this bunch of, military trained individuals or murderers in this group. But it turns out he actually is a serial killer, and he keeps it low key the entire film, playing it as if he is scared and that he's a wimp and he's a weakling throughout the course of the film, only for him later on to realize for some reason, this is kind of a weird point of the movie, that he wants to stay on this planet, that he wants to stay here because he feels like he fits in because of all the murder and death, even though he has not done anything good the entire film other than bitch and moan. And he uses a poison to try to paralyze the character of Isabel at a certain point. All of this ends up leading to his death, and it doesn't really feel like it amounts to a bunch, but it's at least something that's worth mentioning in the film, as it is at least something that stands out in the movie as an interesting character element, though I don't feel like they do enough with it. And again, that goes back to what I mentioned before. There are far too many characters in this movie, and I think had they reeled it in just a little bit, they probably would have been able to give some of these characters a little bit more time to breathe in certain areas. Or I think some of these characters maybe should have died a lot sooner in the film than lugging them around and feeling like you kind of try to balance them. A character that has almost no dialogue in this film, I don't think he has any at all really, is the character of Hanzo. He's the Yakuza member played by Louis Ozawa, and he has a scene in the film where he actually goes toe-to-toe with one of the predators with a katana, and it's a very classic like Japanese Yakuza fight kind of thing. This is easily one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and even though his character doesn't really have depth, even though his character isn't really somebody that you are necessarily attached to while you're watching the film, he is somebody that you can at least have a couple of chuckles with throughout the course of the film, and his presence is at least interesting in the film. And so when he does have this kind of silent battle between him and the predator that's kind of out of honor, I think it's pretty cool. The two of them end up taking each other out in a very classic samurai fashion, which I kind of appreciate the homage to samurai storytelling there. But yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool sequence, and every time I watch it I always just think, yeah, that's fun. Now, I mentioned before that you have Laurence Fishburne in the mix here, because after they have that original encounter with the predators, when they end up realizing that there's a trap, Mahershala Ali's character ends up being killed. They find that there's that other predator who's strung up. They come across an individual who's dressed as a predator, only for it to be revealed as Laurence Fishburne, playing the character of Ronald Nolan. Now, this has to be one of my favorite theatrical memories of all time, because when I saw this scene in theaters, it was a fairly packed theater. It was the opening weekend. I remember watching that scene. It's kind of a dramatic scene. He takes the helmet off. It's revealed that it's a human, but most notably, if you're a film fan, it's Laurence Fishburne. And I'll never forget this, that the kid sitting directly behind me goes, Samuel L. Jackson. And I'll just never forget, like, people around me, my sister and I, just cracking up. And his dad kind of like leaned in and was trying to be like, no, son, that's Laurence Fishburne. That's not Samuel L. Jackson. But I'll never forget the kids just exclaiming it so proudly. Like, he saw Laurence Fishburne on screen and said, Samuel L. Jackson. That'll forever be one of my favorite memories in this movie. So speaking about Samuel L. Jackson in this film, Laurence Fishburne, we instantly learn is a little bit loony. He's talking to people who aren't there. It seems like he wants to be a helping hand in the mix. And ultimately, he ends up kind of deceiving them and tries to scavenge the things that they have when they're sleeping. He tries to trap them in and kind of smoke them out, try to kill them in a certain way or get them to be knocked unconscious so he can steal their gear. He's not actually there to help him, but he has been surviving for years, and I guess something like this is what he feels he needs to do to continue surviving, even though he's kind of lost it. Amidst all this, they end up running into other predators, and Laurence Fishburne's character ends up getting killed. They end up learning that there's a ship that they can get on to try to take off and get out of there. This leads to a big final showdown with the big predators in this film, and they end up going and untying that other predator to have that predator help them alongside them to fight off the bigger predators. It is cool that happens. It is cool to see them team up with the predator in the film, but that predator gets smoked pretty early on, and it really is up to Adrien Brody's character to take out the big bad predator in this film, who looks dope. I love the character design of the predator in this film, the big one. He's a really cool looking predator, and ultimately I find the third act of this film to be a lot of fun. It's just a straightforward action movie that takes it back to basics, feels very much like that original film with Arnold versus the Predator, and yeah, I just wasn't really bored while watching this movie. And it's one of those movies that I can recognize fully as a film fan and as somebody who critiques film online, that it maybe isn't going to be a film for everybody if you're going into this for narrative depth and character depth. But I don't think that this film is trying to be that in any way, shape, or form. I think it's trying to have a fun and interesting premise, and I think it executes on that fun and interesting premise. It has moments where it connects to the original film. It has moments that homage that original film. And in and of itself, it has a lot of fun action sequences that ultimately just ask you to just enjoy yourself, eat some popcorn, and watch a fun action movie with the Predator at the center, with one of the most interesting premises in the entirety of the franchise. And with some of the lesser installments in this franchise when it comes down to dialogue or to performance or to overall story, things like Predator 2 for me, or Alien vs. Predator, the sequel, Requiem, or things like The Predator that came out after this. I think that Predators is a film that maybe some people shrugged off when it came out, but all these years later, it's always stood out to me as easily one of the coolest in the entire franchise. Even if I can recognize that it could have areas where it would be better, but it's still just a fun watch. And I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. What is your favorite film in the Predator franchise? Do you like this film? Do you not like this film? If you do like this film, maybe a favorite scene, whatever the case may be, leave some comments down below. Let me know what you guys think about this film. And did you also think it was Samuel L. Jackson in this film? Or are you not dumb? That poor kid. Honestly, I know his dad probably made him feel a little bit stupid in that moment, and I will always remember that kid. I don't know what the kid looks like, but that kid completely forever made one of my favorite movie memories of all time. So I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. And yeah, after this, guys, it's time for Alien vs. Predator and Alien vs. Predator Requiem, and then we wrap this up. It's been so much fun covering the Alien and Predator films with you guys, and it's been so much fun to have a lot of you guys chime in the comments and join along. And I do really look forward to jumping on to the next franchise and continuing on our journey into movies. A big thanks to you guys for watching. A big thanks to you guys for commenting, subscribing, and liking. And I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.